I'll admit that while I don't generally like choose-your-own-adventure style games, Life is Strange 1 was an exception to that rule. It built up a rich setting and cast of characters, then struck you with a challenging choice to choose between the two of them. Banishers' Ghosts of New Eden really fascinated me with its story structure, having that huge impactful choice at the beginning of its narrative rather than the end. Ghosts of New Eden has a perplexing narrative framework, and that compelled me whether to explore its story structure was intriguing or faulty. In Ghosts of New Eden, you have to agree with your partner on what to do with her spirit once you reach the end of the game, setting the tone of the entire journey before you. Every other game I can think of would save this climactic decision for the end of the story, but Ghost of New Eden presents us with the relationship-defining choice almost immediately, and while I love narrative subversion, it's worth examining if this is an excellent choice to make from a writing perspective. However, before we get into the meat of this, I need to give the context of my choice. I decided to ascend Antea, as it felt like the appropriate option for what Red would do, and I think it made for a far more compelling narrative to go on a journey with your lover one last time, knowing you'll never see them again after it's all over. I also haven't replayed the game because this week has been insane, with Mario vs Donkey Kong, Ultros and Tomb Raider remakes. But I also don't think the quality of the combat was high enough for me to want to replay this game again, but we can discuss that another time. So what is the positive of putting this choice at the start of the game? Firstly, it sets the tone for your entire adventure to come. Will this be a selfish story of revenge and resurrection, or will it be a teary tale of ghosts and goodbyes? Letting the player decide the goals of their main character isn't something we've seen all too much in gaming. Ironically, this kind of character-defining decision-making would have helped Don't Nod a ton with their Life is Strange games, but oh well. Giving the player control over the desires of an established character who isn't some custom stand-in makes the player feel like they influence part of an already existing narrative, rather than letting them create a weaker one on their own with the limited tools you give them. It gets the player far more invested in the story if they're fighting for a goal they personally chose. It increased my engagement in the narrative because I knew that this crucial decision I made at the start of the game was hiding an entirely different tone behind the other option. It also lets the player roleplay as a highly evil Red, as there's no vow binding you to keep your word with Antea, meaning you can do one thing and say another, since she's powerless to stop you without a corporeal form. This would make Red one of the most deranged protagonists around. However, if you choose this route, I can't confirm how the story plays out. But usually when a new storytelling technique emerges, it's not because someone hasn't thought of it before, but because there are significant drawbacks to the idea, and that's certainly the case with Ghosts of New Eden, as there are a number of reasons why presenting the defining decision at the beginning is detrimental. Such a massive choice like this would usually be presented at the end of the game, because the game needs to give you the necessary context and information to help you make an informed decision, and Ghosts of New Eden simply doesn't do that. Since I'm barely out of the prologue, I don't know nearly enough about Red and Antea's relationship to help them make the most important decision of their lives. What if I decided to resurrect Antea, but over the course of the story, she presented herself as an unlikable character? I'd have made the wrong choice because I didn't have the right context I needed to make the correct one. Resurrecting Antea is an especially problematic choice to make, as it relies on your decisions to sacrifice the settlers of New Eden to energize her soul enough to return to the world of the living. How can I possibly make a choice if these people deserve to live or not when I've barely met any of them? It's such an extreme decision to make that I'd be surprised to see if many people chose to resurrect her initially. Now, all this criticism of choice can be rendered moot, as near the end of the game, you have the option to negotiate your promise with Antea and agree on a different outcome. But to me, this feels like a cop-out. What was the point of asking me at the start if you were just going to ask me if I'm sure later? Would the story have been better if Red and Antea couldn't reach a conclusion initially, and decided to make their choice depending on the quality of the people they met on their travels? I don't know. On the one hand, it lets the player make the right choice without Don't Nod having to chicken out on their brutal decision, but on the other, it does seem like resurrecting or banishing Antea would be the issue they would have to solve before continuing on with anything else. Banishers Ghosts of New Eden has an odd but bold method for deciding your character's motivation, asking you to decide the fate of your beloved and innocent people before you've ever had the chance to learn about either of them. While the lack of context makes this a puzzling place to put this problem, I'll admit that it made me feel invested in the story, because I got to decide what it was I was fighting to accomplish.